Welcome everybody to the Fortify webinar. I'm Vinny, the director of both Fortify groups and webinars. I'm thrilled to have, I know I say I'm thrilled to have every guest, but Dr. Hedelius is a rock star, and we're just really, really happy to have you here, Dr. Hedelius. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking a little bit today, maybe a lot, I hope, about what the latest brain science reveals about problematic porn use. We're going to have a few tentacles off of that, but let me introduce you, Doctor. You are, I said you're a rock star, but let me say literally, you have a doctorate in psychology. You are also a licensed clinical social worker. You are presently the clinical director of Paradise Creek Recovery, which we'll talk about a little later, and I've actually posted a link in our comments to that for those that have some interest or questions about that. But maybe most prominently right now, you are the current president of the, I had it here for, you are the president of the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health. Sexual health in quotes.
Yes.
It can be a touchy subject and can be very subjective, but what an important topic, as men like myself over the last 25 years who are recovering, seeking recovery, are saying, help me with some guidelines and some authoritative direction to find these boundaries, safe boundaries, healthy boundaries, and even throwing in maybe a piece of the moral and ethical piece of sort of what's really right and what's out of bounds and wrong. So what a challenge. And but there's something that our audience needs to know about you. Your biggest accomplishment may well be you are the father of 9 children, and I congratulate you. Have you had to see a therapist for that, Dr. Hedelius?
Right down the hall.
9 kids, and you've lived to tell about it. I have a feeling your wife.
Living.
Yes. You must have an amazing wife who is supportive. And
yeah, she's a great one. Really.
I mentioned Paradise Creek.
7 daughters. So that makes
oh my. I didn't know how that was separated. I was 3 and Vision 4.5 and 4 and 5, 7 and 2. You really do have your work cut out for you. I want to alert the audience. I don't even know if I would call it a technical problem, but from time to time, your video is kicking in and out, but you are there. I think you're hearing us, you're hearing me, and then the video will come back. So forgive that little off and on, but you are there. You're not taking a 7-Up break during that time. You are the current president and director of Paradise Creek Recovery. This is a hugely successful and intimate 8-bed inpatient facility. It's basically in the Raft River area of southern Idaho. That helps those who are struggling with compulsive sexual behavior, problematic porn use, trauma, as well as other addictions. You've been at this a long time, not just a couple, 3 years. What got you interested in working in this field and in this specific arena of compulsive sexual behavior?
Well, yeah, I'm starting my 24th year. I originally thought in graduate school that I would work primarily with victims of sexual abuse. That's where my research was and where my interests were. And when I got hired out of graduate school, I got hired at a clinic that specialized primarily in the treatment of sexual offenders. And so as I got working with these individuals, my eyes really were opened up, and I realized that the person sitting in front of me had a much deeper story than what I had previously thought, maybe hearing about things on the news or whatnot. And while there certainly is a person who has a sexual addiction versus a sexual offender, there are differences, and it's important to note that. But the dynamic that is unique to most of both areas, both groups of people, trauma and loss, and that the acting out generally is connected to that trauma. And so understand that more and the impact on the brain that that trauma had, some lights kind of opened up to me and said, if there's ever a group of individuals that need some of the best treatment there is, it's people who struggle with sexual issues. And I by no means think that I'm one of the best or the best, but it began a journey and pilgrimage of studying more about the brain and neurology to try and get to a point of being able to help these people most effectively.
On a very personal level, I thank you for being one of those that have followed call it the call, or being led, because as you probably then also know, in my day, in the late 60s, early 70s, advice either on a clinical level or on a religious level was quite narrow. I remember confessing to a religious leader about my porn and masturbation, and I got a pat on the back and said, what you need to do is go whistle a happy tune. And I whistled that happy tune, and I didn't notice any particularly powerful change. Not that activities like that aren't helpful, but mine was more deeply rooted. And the word you brought up, which took me years to discover, was trauma. And there was excessive trauma in my early childhood. Not to blame it, not to have an excuse, but the freedom of saying, that's what happened. Thank you for following that path. And you may not consider yourself the best, but somebody posted here, spend 210. I've met with Dr. H, and he's amazing. So you already have one of our Fortify members extolling your virtues, Dr. Hidelius. You have a motto, and again, I've posted the link to Paradise Creek Recovery. They'll see this motto, but I love this motto. It speaks to me: discover, hope, and heal. And one of my, we were talking on Monday, one of my favorite movies is Shawshank Redemption. And I love the line when Andy Dufresne is talking to his friend Red, played by Morgan Freeman. And he said, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. I don't know how we find lasting freedom without developing some initial level of hope. But then I saw the word discover, and I thought, you know what? There are things I need to discover, ought to discover, should discover, must discover before I can really feed and grow my hope. And I don't know if that's the context, but could you make a couple of comments about discover, hope, and heal, and how that came to be your motto?
Sure. And we developed that as a result of believing that one of the first things that has to happen even before hope is people have to learn that healing is possible, that there have been other people who have done it. And especially we learned that the partners and spouses really need that. And so discovering that there are interventions, that there are people who have been successful at it before, there are some proven methods that can help with this. That once you get that, that transcends into hope, and that hope is a spiritual, physical process, which then ultimately, in time, through consistency, leads to healing. And so that's where that came from, and that's what we try to communicate to folks.
You said you're approaching 24 years in this arena. We've got 48 minutes and to help those who are struggling with problematic porn use. I want you to feel free to talk about those things that you know are critical to their efforts. Naturally, we can't cover it all, but when you shared a slide presentation with me some weeks ago as we were preparing for this webinar, one of the things that I loved was sort of here are 10 of the most important things and truths that you'd discovered over your time in this field. And they are so appropriate to share here today with our members. And you do it in any order that you want, but would you share with this group today, because they tie into the brain science all over the place, and they tie into the latest in brain science and discoveries and how it relates to compulsive sexual behavior disorder and problematic porn use. Would you feel going all right in that direction, Dr. Hedelius?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'll give you the.
So, okay. So what Vinny's talking about here is last year I was at a symposium in Phoenix, Arizona, giving a talk, and what I thought I would do is take some of the main things that I have learned throughout my career and try and capsulize them in such a way that I can give this to other clinicians that would help them take those things out into their practice. So we have some of those up here on my screen, and I'm going to bring mine up here a little bit. One of the first ones that we look at is the importance of connection in the process of healing. And as we connect with people, there are literal neurobiological changes that take place in the brain. So we were talking about the importance of good social connections in overcoming addictions. And that Dr. Dan Siegel is famous for many things, but one of the things he said is that social integration cultivates neural integration. So many times I think when we look at healing, we look at, well, what's the 3 steps of masturbation and the 5 steps of not doing pornography and so on and so forth. And it was really that concrete. But the reality is we need to focus on other things that are going to set our minds and our nervous systems up in such a way that would be successful for healing. And so we connect socially with groups. We focus on getting friends outside of group and doing social things. And when we do that, in the temporal lobes of the brain, there are social circuits, and those social circuits light up and respond and fire, and that feels good to us when that happens.
If it fires, it rewires. Is that right?
Yeah, neurons that fire together, wire together. And part of what that is, Alan Shore talks about having a right brain to right brain connection. And we've all felt that when we're in a situation, when we feel connected with somebody, it's because our right brains literally are connecting. If we're in a meeting with an employer or a partner for that matter, our marital partner, and we're not feeling connected, it's because at least one of us is in the left brain, and connection won't happen that way.
Makes sense.
So social connections get us into the right brain. And one of the ways I do this sometimes in therapy, if I'm having a difficult time communicating this point to somebody, I take out a little ball that I bought at the dollar store and I just start throwing it to them. And immediately they start laughing. And they know what to do. They throw it back, and we play catch. And we talk about the fact that what just happened here is our brains connected. We activated those social circuits, and we're now connected. And it's such a crucial and important piece for healing.
I'm just going to ask you, let's try cutting off our videos, see if we still stay connected. You're starting to cut out. You hear me?
Very good.
Very good.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
I like that picture of me better than my actual picture anyway up there. So let's move forward.
Yeah, that's a little better one than me too.
Yeah, you and I talked. You and I talked a little bit about. oxytocin, and you shared a little story with me. Talk about oxytocin.
Well, oxytocin is a chemical that we're all aware of for the most part. It's that chemical, that feel-good chemical that is released into the blood when we fall in love and when we begin bonding with anybody. So the first time we oxytocin is when we're born in an ideal situation. A mother us, and immediately when we're out of the womb in our mother's arms, we're getting a high dose of oxytocin neurologically at that time, and that's for the purpose of bonding us very quickly to a mother. Mother gets that same dose, and ironically, as first from mother as a baby, we get an even higher dose of that oxytocin, which creates that strong bond. And a father or other onlookers, just by witnessing this experience, also get a dose of that. So that kind of trains the mind and the body and the nervous system to repeat that experience at a later time. And those later times are when we begin to fall in love with people. And in many ways, I think people who struggle with problematic pornography use or other sexual behaviors, what they're really doing is they're chasing that feeling. They're chasing the feeling of trying to be connected and have a relationship. And to the outside, it may just look like this is people, but it's much, much deeper than that. That they're really trying to connect just through maybe an unhealthy way. Another dynamic, however, with oxytocin is that we know through research, as we experience the release of oxytocin in our bloodstreams, our brains and cells are literally able to heal from physical trauma, emotional trauma, whatever it is. So again, that reinforces that need for connections, that connections cause us to heal in so many ways.
That's a word that builds my hope, because for much of my life, I had the belief, the idea, I can't heal. How do I know I can't heal? Because I'm not healing. And by not healing, I'm validating that I can't heal. And I love hearing you say that, because science, and I don't know that science was at a point in the 70s where they could make that statement. We certainly are today. So if you want to talk about something powerful from recent brain science, it's what you're saying, Doctor. We can heal.
Sure. Thank you, Vinny. In 2003, there was a nice study done by a scientist by last name of Heinrich, and he looked at what social support did for people. So they did a study where they had people come in and sit before a group of Confederates. They were all part of the research team, and they were paying these individuals to participate. And the task were going to ask them a bunch of questions that there's no way they could get. They may be able to get some of them, but they weren't able to get all of them. And as the questions went on, they would ask faster, and harder questions. And they measured their levels of cortisol before and after this experiment. And on some random individuals, they allowed them to bring a support person with them. So they bring the support person with them. The support person stayed out in the hallway, not in the room with them, but they just knew they were out in the hallway. They ran them all through the experiment and then looked at their cortisol levels. Now, cortisol levels are stress hormones. The stress hormones are released into the body when we're stressed. The research found that the group of individuals who brought the support person with them had higher oxytocin levels, and their levels of cortisol were suppressed much lower than the other group. And that was manifest just by the fact that the person knew that somebody had their back in the other room. And so as we look at going through recovery, there's probably never a time when someone feels more alone, when they're acting out, when they maybe have lost a marriage, lost a job, they feel that no one can understand or would want to understand, feeling very, very alone. But again, if we therapeutically can create connections and having somebody with them, maybe not 24 hours a day, but just knowing that this person's got their back, that's the greatest intervention.
Wow.
It's going to increase oxytocin levels, which will decrease their need for pornography, and their cortisol levels are down, so they're dealing with stress better.
Absolutely knew none of that 40 years ago. And I just, even as you speak it, I think how wonderful that would have been to have names and categories and definitions and stuff that defined what was going on with me. Because as my guys in my group and guys in the community at Fortify know, I use the good thing is our videos are now canceled, but I'm holding up my little piece of dog do. And that was the only conclusion I could ever come up with, was I'm a piece of garbage. That's why I don't heal. And you're reminding us that there are these other pieces that are taking place physiologically, biologically inside of me. And if I could access them, be even more aware of them, I can I can reduce stress in the cortisol. I can enhance oxytocin. And I hear you saying that in doing those, this is part of the rewiring process, call it the healthy / happy, positive rewiring that can take place inside of us, Doctor. Now let me make sure you're there. Are you there? This is what we call preaching to the choir.
I still got you, Vinny?
Just now, just that moment kicked in.
You mentioned something there right before we got cut off, some other neat research that is very recent, in the last few years, 2013, research shows that scientists took oxytocin in a vial, actually, and inserted it in people's bloodstreams. And what they found was that the connectivity temporarily between the emotional brain, which is where we have all the negative feelings and emotions, and the temporal brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, where we have all the negative thoughts, that connectivity decreased temporarily. And the implications of that is what we were just talking about when Vinny said his only conclusion was that I was a piece of dog doo-doo, piece of garbage. The feelings come from the emotional brain, but the thoughts come from the analytical brain. And so oxytocin produces an impact that causes us to have less connectivity there in those times. And so the critical part is shut off. It's inhibited. And that's why commonly when you go out and you have a good relationship with somebody, you're not as critical of yourself or as others, because that oxytocin level is much higher.
Wow. I'm hearing you say we're chasing dopamine, but we need oxytocin. That may not be scientifically correct, but I sometimes feel when we talk about chasing the high, I'm chasing dopamine, but you're talking about the beautiful effects of oxytocin. You also talked about, you brought up this idea of the thoughts in the analytical part of the brain. My thoughts, I know we don't have time to cover all the things we wanted to, which of course is going to have me beg you to come back again, Doctor. Please say right now you'll come back.
I'll come back, and I will not bring my bad luck with technology.
Thank you. No, that's appreciate that. That is not your fault, but we don't know whose fault it is or what's going on. Mindfulness is a gigantic piece. A lot of us have heard about mindfulness. You taught me some stuff on Monday when we visited about mindfulness that I had not considered. Mindfulness is part of the great truths that you've discovered in your working in this arena. Talk about that a bit.
Well, yeah, in last decade plus a little bit, there's been a lot of great research come out on mindfulness and the physical and the mental health benefits. One piece of mindfulness that I really like is how it impacts neuroplasticity. And Dan Siegel again talks about how even the form of attention can change the brain. So if I focus my attention on something and give that enough attention, then energy flows there and neurons fire there and pathways then begin to form. But one of the struggles that I often see clinically, inpatient and outpatient, is this question of how do I manage these feelings or how do I manage these thoughts? Because as we know, when one's starting to sober up, there's a lot of withdrawal that takes place as the mind and the body's detoxing. And it's a very high period of relapse because the brain and the body's trying to adjust to not having it. And this mindfulness research goes a little bit contrary to what us have thought intuitively throughout the years. And what it involves, however, is giving up some of the resistance. So as opposed to standing at the door and barricading the door, saying, I'm not going to allow the thoughts to come in, the first technique is to imagine that you're on a beach. And as you stand there on that beach, those waves flow around your feet and flow back out. There's absolutely nothing you can do to stop that wave from coming over your feet. At the same time, there's absolutely nothing you can do to get that wave to go back out to the ocean. What you simply have to do is one thing, and that's
interesting.
And if I can just simply wait, and really only a few seconds, the waves come in and the waves go out. And what I can predict that they're going to come again, and I'll be prepared, but they'll go out. But if I can take that and focus on sexual feelings or sexual thoughts, then I realize that thoughts, even during and after and years after one's completed formal recovery, but still in the process of their own recovery, and years after achieving sobriety, because of the fact that we have a heartbeat, sexual feelings are still going to come in many situations. So if I predict that and realize that they're going to come and they're going to go, it takes the resistance away and doesn't allow them to take up so much preoccupied space in the brain, so that we're then more able to focus on going to work and taking the children to the park and those things that are important to us. So that's the first thing with mindfulness. Second thing, however, is that there's a researcher by the name of John Cresswell who is at a university in Pittsburgh that did some Fmri research. So that's functional magnetic resonant imaging, where he put participants in the study under this Fmri machine where their brains were being studied. And then they showed them pictures of intense stimuli that would invoke intense emotions. And they found that when they saw these pictures, the right part of the brain, the right amygdala and limbic system lit up like firecrackers. Just a lot of activity. They then had the participants, however, label or put a name on the feeling or the emotion they were experiencing. So, such as this is fear, or this is disgust, or this is anger. And what happened almost immediately is that the right brain went dark, and the left prefrontal and right prefrontal lit up, which is the analytical brain that will allow us to make more rational decisions. And immediately when that happened, the intensity of the emotions went down.
Wow.
Just by putting a label on it. So we often say therapeutically, you have to name it in order to tame it.
Wow.
So I think this technique can be very helpful for people who are struggling with lapses and relapses and going through withdrawal. Know, first of all, that that's just part of the process, unfortunately. It's just part of the process of getting well. But at the same time, you don't have to live in that level of anxiety forever if you get skilled at naming it and hence taming it.
You had mentioned I've got to feel it to heal it. And I know I've often run from some of those things because they can be painful, and they often lead to shame, especially if I'm left by myself to do the considering of my behaviors and my actions. But this is sort of, I think there's a little of Brene Brown in here too, of vulnerability and embracing and letting this stuff do something for us rather than to us. That's simply an opinion. That's what it feels like. I love this name it to tame it.
Well, I think you're exactly right, that in many ways that this is what Brene is talking about. We can take this a little bit further, which might even be closer to where she's at. We have to feel it if we're going to heal it. So name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. And this is often in regards to dealing with a lot of the grief that we experience as a result of our addiction and relationships that have been altered by that. So maybe we lose a marriage, or maybe we lose a relationship with children or something of that nature. That's painful. And we don't need to minimize that experience one iota, because it is what it is. But if we can feel it today and tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, however long it takes, we can heal it. If we don't give ourselves that privilege, we won't heal it. Now, at the same time, those who may be fortunate enough to still be in a relationship, assuming that that's a healthy relationship that's going forward, we've got to make sure that we afford our partner that same privilege and opportunity in that space to feel it, so that he or she can then heal it. And if we give them the space to feel the betrayal and the abandonment, and to feel it again and to feel it again, then they're going to become a one and at peace with it, and they're going to find healing. And so both of those techniques are really in the family of mindfulness work.
I got to tell you though, Doctor, 25 years ago, when I'm having my first 2 weeks of, I won't even call it sobriety, I call it abstinence. There was probably very little sobriety, but I was free from porn and masturbation at that time. And I remember running into my wife, who had demanded, you either be done with this or I'm out of here. And I had no clue. I really did. And it isn't because I was a psychopath or a sociopath or didn't have the capacity for empathy, but I really didn't have a clue of the harm that I had caused by my porn use. And I have begun to hear this advice and just wanted you to emphasize that, because sometimes we think, we as those struggling with the problematic porn use, hey, I got a week clean and I want to go running into my wife. And in truth, those guys in my group, I'm standing up as the group leader, giving these guys a standing ovation. I'm proud of them having a week, but at the same time, I may not need to expect a standing ovation from my wife of 20 years who have just discovered I've been looking at porn all 20 of those years or a good portion of those years. Can you reinforce that again, just a little bit from the wives' standpoint?
Sure. I think it might have been that said when the discovery is made, the addict comes out of hiding and the partner goes into hiding, and those dynamics are very true because they feel so much shame, and they feel shame from another standpoint in that it isn't what I did, but it is often a matter of, look what somebody did to me, and did I somehow have a part of that? That's some of their initial thoughts sometimes. And so they're really stuck in two states of mind. One, the emotional brain, the limbic system is going crazy and very activated. But then in terms of coping with that, they get into the left brain, which is the analytical brain, and they're finding all the faults with everything, life, whatnot, and that's simply a defense mechanism. And so they get in that defense mechanism because of being in the emotional brain, too much is too intense, and they get overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. But if they can understand this concept of feel it to heal it, they then give themselves permission to be in the emotional brain and feel it as long as they can and need to. So the addict then on the other side, as he or she gives the partner that emotional space, they're doing two things. That they're giving the emotional space so she can feel it, but they then are also expressing and displaying empathy. And empathy is a silent healer. It will heal faster than anything. And the addict starts to put him or herself in the shoes of the partner, the victim, the betrayal victim, and he or she feels this empathy. And that dynamic, we know through research, stimulates healing and even stimulates the immune system in the body and in the brain. So if we can do this, you're actually practicing neuroscience right there in your living room or in your house when you're able to do this. And just a quick demonstration of this, and I'll give it back to you, Vinny. There were a student health center. There was a group of students came in with the flu. And the intervention was to prescribe to them an antibiotic. One group, however, they had a 30 to 45 second intervention that went something like this. And this was around the time of finals. The intervention was, oh, you're a student here and you're in the middle of finals, you're away from home. This must be very difficult to be trying to get through finals at this time being sick. I'm sure sorry that this is where you're at, and I hope this helps you. Gave that intervention to one group, the other group just got the medication. They went about their ways. The group that got the medication along with that 30 to 45 second empathic statement got better on average 1 to 2 days earlier than the other group. Now, we may not think that's a significant. When it comes to having the flu and those symptoms, it really is a significant period of time. But what we know is empathy, the expression of empathy, facilitates healing, and it facilitates the turning on of that right brain connection. So I can't say enough about empathy in healing our brains, and especially to the betrayal victims.
I appreciate you also tying in empathy with literally the neuroscience. You know, we can read about empathy and what an important trait it is, but it's important. We're learning now it's not just important, it's important because of how it performs in our bodies. And I'm so appreciative you bring that up. The bad news is we're at 12:53. We got about 7 minutes left, and I'm going to plead that we hit just a few minutes on psychological scarcity. A lot of us are always saying, man, I go 2 weeks, I go a month, I go 6 months, but I always have, and I relapse, I slip, and we scratch our heads and we wonder why. And when you explain psychological scarcity to me, it really resonated, and I think it will with lots of the users of porn, and it's psychological scarcity. Can you share that as a component of our struggle? Why, what it looks like, why we have it? I know what the problem is with the settings is that when I speak, it shuts off everything. That's what's happening. I need to just be quiet. Let's give it a quick pause. Gosh darn it, time's running out. I hate that. This stuff is gold.
We back together, Vinny?
Yeah, we are just right now. I don't know what you picked up of what I was saying.
I heard all of your questions, so yes,
Okay.
I can go forward. Scarcity is not about quantity. It's about perception of how I feel about what I have. And when I start quantifying things, ironically, I get into a state of scarcity. So as we're going through recovery, we often have feelings of never enough love, never enough safety, never enough sleep, never enough sex, never enough security, money, all those type of dynamics. And that scarcity, especially if we stick with sexuality in a relationship, that repels the partner quite significantly. So then we get less of what we desire and what might very well play a strong role in our healing and recovery for both partners if we look at this through a sexual health perspective. So change that dynamic and begin to look at these type of things in a state of sufficiency. And so that there is enough time in a day, there is enough love, there is enough sex, there is enough security, whatever. If we look at this through a lens of sufficiency and even gratitude, then it turns the tides on that state of scarcity. But one will never get better if they continue to live in a state of scarcity. And when we act out with pornography or any type of other sexual material, it's because the scarcity has finally won over and it's convinced us, yeah, you're not enough, they're not enough, life's not enough, so go ahead and do this and it'll suit. That's the thinking of the brain, and that's grounded in scarcity. So we practice the counter nature to this by living in sufficiency, and which is also really a mindfulness.
Boy, I want to talk about empathy. I want to talk about 20 more things. And again, please accept my apologies for whatever our tech difficulties are, which we've not had this kind of tech difficulty before. We'll get it solved by next time. But let me give you a minute to do two things. I'd like you to type in either now or afterwards, because the comments remain open. And as you're a member of Fortified Dr. Hidelius, you can post that. But I'd like to have you put your contact information for both Paradise Creek Recovery, and if you're comfortable, even yourself as a clinician. You live in northern Utah, an area that I'm fond of because I went to high school there where you practice. But put your contact information down as you're comfortable, and anybody that feels that call to contact you for further assistance, boy, we give them green lights all the way. Let me.
I wonder if I might do that after we're on the air, because I started to type something, and that's one of the times that we lost connection. So maybe I don't know if that's related at all, but I'll just give that information to you to post so that we don't
Very
risk
good.
possibly losing connections.
You talk about just scratching the surface, and I know our interruptions haven't helped, but I think of discover, hope, and heal. I've discovered so much with you personally over the last couple of months of contact. Your information is sound. It is the latest. It's progressive, but most of all, it is healing and helpful. And really do appreciate you being willing to come back. You'll hear from me as soon as I know that this little tech issue is resolved, because our members deserve and need to hear more and more of this from you. It's exceptional material. Discover, hope, heal. I'm not a piece of garbage. I'm a human being with issues. I've got to name it to tame it, feel it to heal it, understanding how empathy actually physiologically, neurologically can be healing, how oxytocin is what I'm looking for. Dopamine is what I get. Oxytocin is what I'm looking for. So, I mean, you've just spurred so many other little thoughts of mine. I thank you so much, Dr. Hedelius, for being with us and putting up with the challenges we had today. By way of announcement, our Fortified chat. Oh, you're so welcome.
Problem. Thank you.
And I know we have a little bit of a delay as well. I apologize for that. Our Fortified chat will be August 14th and not August 21st. And also one of our phenomenal members, Coach Nick, also group leader Nick, will be talking about the art of self-love. And again, all of our topics are huge, but you don't want to miss Coach Nick. He's amazing, has a great story, and we've known each other for almost a decade now. He has a great recovery story. Don't miss it on August 28th. And Doctor, you will be hearing from us, and we can't wait to have you back again, and continued success at the clinic and in your practice. And thank you for being with us today. Thank you all members for being here as well, and your patience. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.